Hello, welcome to EPG Pachala program in Linguistics. I'm Pramod Pandey at the Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We are going to discuss the contents of the second module of the course Introduction to Phonetics and Phonology. Let us recapitulate some of the points we made in Module 1. We distinguished between phonetics and phonology by saying that phonetics is the study of the physical properties of speech sounds. The three aspects of the physical properties of speech sounds are taken into account. These are production, transmission, and reception. The way the sounds are produced by the speaker, by her vocal apparatus, the properties of speech sounds as they travel between the mouth of the speaker and the ear of the listener, that is acoustics, and the reception of speech sounds by the hearer listener. Accordingly, we have three branches of phonetics. These are known as articulatory phonetics, acoustic phonetics, and auditory phonetics. Before we talk about the different branches of phonetics in modern linguistics, let us remind ourselves of the study of phonetics in ancient India, which was very well developed. For thousands of years, phoneticians teaching the pronunciation of Sanskrit in the various texts spent a great deal of time in elaborating on the phonetic properties of these speech sounds. Some of the terminology that is used in modern phonetics, in fact, is based on the terms that were used by these ancient phoneticians, such as aghosh, saghosh, mahapran, translated as voiceless, voiced, aspirated. These, we are told, were based entirely on the phonetics studied in ancient India. For a good look at some of the features of the study of phonetics in India, take a look at a book called Phonetics in Ancient India by W.S. Allen. We also are going to discuss in great detail some of these main topics covered in the study of phonetics in ancient India in the course on ancient grammatical tradition. In order to talk about sounds, speech sounds, it is necessary for us to use the phonetic labels. A lot of these labels are based on articulatory phonetics. The labels are mainly of two kinds, one broad labels and the other specific labels. And most of these labels, to repeat, are based on the articulatory features of speech sounds. The articulatory features of speech sounds are dependent on the organs of speech. It is thus necessary for us to be familiar with the organs of speech. Let's consider some of the sounds, segmental sounds, consonants and vowels, and see how we talk about them in phonetics. We have sounds such as p, b, t, d, k, g. These are broadly termed as plosive consonants. So we've used terms such as consonant, which is a broad label, and plosive, which again is a broad label. It stands for a group of consonant sounds. If we turn to some more specific subset, such as p, t, k, then what we find is that the label becomes more specific and we say voiceless plosive consonants. Similarly with vowels, we have vowels such as e, a, o, u. When we talk about all of them, we use the term vowels. Suppose we want to talk only about e and u, then we will say closed vowels. We say e and a, we will say front vowels, etc. When we want to go even more specific, for example, we want to refer to the consonant, plosive consonant p, then we use a more specific label such as voiceless bilabial plosive. Similarly, if you want to refer to the sound vowel U, we refer to it as rounded close back vowel. The goal of phonetics, articulatory phonetics, is to give us the way to identify and distinguish each linguistic sound from another linguistic sound in order to avoid any ambiguity in reference to the sound. Sometimes we have to refer to a group of sounds and the common properties of those sounds. Then the term, we need to use terms which can characterize those groups. If we have to distinguish between specific sounds from the group, then we have to characterize them in terms of those specific distinctions. Thus, we use terms such as bilabial, that is the place name for the place at which the sound p is produced. And we use a term such as dental for t, that is a name of the place where t is produced, and so on. In general, by convention, we use 3-term labels to identify a specific sound, and it is considered to be adequate to use the 3-term labels for both consonants and vowels. Thus, p is distinguished from, let's say, b in terms of one of the features. P is voiceless and b is voiced, but they share 2 other features. P is bilabial and plosive, so is b bilabial and plosive. But the difference between p and b is that p is a voiceless bilabial plosive and b is a voiced bilabial plosive. So these 3 terms, voice, voiceless, and then bilabial or dental or alveolar, and plosive or fricative or nasal, these are sufficient to identify each and every consonant in a language. Occasionally, however, we need a 4-term label. This is especially in Indian languages, where we have at one place a configuration of 4 consonants. So we have p, p, b, bh. Now, in order to distinguish all these 4 sounds produced at the same place, we need 4-term labels. 3-term labels are not enough. So we say aspirated, voiceless or voiced, bilabial, plosive. So aspirated, unaspirated, voiced, voiceless, bilabial, dental, etc., and then plosive. So 4-term labels are necessary to identify a consonant in English. It's the same with vowels. Normally we talk about the rounding of the vowels. So a vowel is rounded, unrounded. We talk about the height of vowels. We say a vowel is close or half close, etc. And then we talk about the backness of the vowel, whether it is produced in the front of the mouth or at the back of the mouth. So the 3-term labels are often enough. Sometimes we need to add a 4th term called short and long as well. We now take a look at the speech organs that are used in producing speech sounds. Take a look at the slide. We have a large number of the speech organs. Most of these are organs also that are used for other purposes, such as the esophagus, larynx, and so on. But these are also the organs which are used in producing speech. So we notice here from the bottom we have esophagus, larynx consisting of the vocal cords, and then as we go up we notice epiglottis, pharynx, the tongue, the uvula, the velum, the palate, the alveolar ridge, the teeth, the lips. Then there are these the lower jaw, and we also have the two cavities, the oral cavity and the nasal cavity. All these are involved in the production of speech. As we go along in the following modules, we will take a look at which of them are involved in producing which features of speech sounds. We next turn to acoustic phonetics. Acoustic phonetics studies speech sounds mainly in terms of the variations in air pressure and makes use of instruments such as sound spectrograph and oscillograph. It's mainly because acoustic phonetics has to be studied by means of instruments that the development of acoustic phonetics has been somewhat late. Articulatory phonetics didn't need the use of instruments as much as acoustic phonetics, and thus acoustic phonetics, the study of acoustic phonetics has been gaining ground, so much so that today most courses in phonetics are actually courses in acoustic phonetics. However, we cannot study acoustic properties unless we learn to relate them to the articulatory phenomenon and processes. So in this course, we will be looking mainly at the articulatory and acoustic phonetics. What are the main acoustic parameters that we study in relation to speech sounds? These are mainly three. One, the fundamental frequency, or F0. The fundamental frequency is the rate of the repetition of the cycles of air pressure. Different speakers have different fundamental frequencies. We have broad groups such as adults versus young ones, or males versus females, and they seem to have a typical range of variation measured in hertz. Thus, adult males are found to produce their speech in the range of 85 to 155 hertz. Adult females have a higher range. A typical adult female produces speech in the range of 165 to 255 hertz. Infants have an even higher range. We are told that most infants produce speech in the range of 400 to 600 hertz. Thus, there is a wide variation in the use of the range of fundamental frequency. As we go into details of speech sounds, what we find that the fundamental frequency is responsible for the production of very important phenomena such as tone and intonation, a lot of grammar, grammatical meaning, a lot of socio-linguistic meanings are dependent on the use of the fundamental frequency. The second important aspect of acoustic properties of speech sounds is the amplitude. That is the relative increase in air pressure. So, which is measured in terms of the distance from the place of rest of air particles. So, the higher the air particles go, the higher is the amplitude. It seems that sounds differ with regard to amplitude. A sound like ah is found to have greater amplitude than a sound like a, for example. Somehow human ears and speakers and hearers are able to distinguish sounds in terms of their amplitude. So the amplitude plays an important role. Apart from the linguistic meanings, we also have other meanings such as various pragmatic meanings that speech conveys. For example, anger is conveyed by using producing sounds at a very high amplitude, and you produce lower sounds at the, if you want to sound polite, and so on. Now, amplitude is an important phenomena thus in the study of both linguistic and non-linguistic aspects of the use of language. The third important feature is formants. They are also called overtones of the F0. We will get to study them in great detail in the modules 9 to 12. It's, however, useful for us to know what these overtones are. The overtones are the resonances that the fundamental frequency produces within the vocal apparatus. And we are told that there are at the most 4 overtones. We call them F1, F2, F3, F4. We have a wide range of resonances. Speech can have resonances, have overtones going up to 16 or 20, but only the first 4 resonances, F1 to F4, are involved in distinguishing speech sounds. One of them, for example, the F1 distinguishes the height of vowels. F2 distinguishes the frontness and backness of vowels, and so on. You learn more about them in the following modules. Let's take a look at a diagram that follows. We now take a look at the acoustic properties of an utterance from Hindi. These acoustic properties are shown in terms of 2 parts of an acoustic picture. Call them oscillogram and spectrogram. Oscillogram gives us the general pattern of intensity, and the spectrogram gives us the overtones of, or F0. And we also have a third dimension, namely duration, captured in both. So the sentence is Aadmi ek table kheech raha hai, which is translated as the man is pulling a table. The frequency component of the segmental speech sounds are shown in the middle portion, and the amplitude is shown in the top portion by the darkness of the waves. Each segment has its own pattern. Notice, the duration of the entire utterance is given at the bottom. It's possible to extract the duration of each portion of the utterance, including the segment. Let us now turn to introducing ourselves to auditory phonetics. The auditory processes of speech perception are much less amenable to direct observation than articulatory and acoustic processes. Auditory processes are heavily dependent on human physiology, the complex structure of the human ear, and its relation to the brain, and the psychological process of interpreting the information received by the brain through the ears. The study of auditory phonetics is still at an introductory stage. We know pretty much little about how the human ear and the brain are related, how the brain encodes and decodes the messages through the ears. However, it is important to recognize that auditory aspects of speech are as important as articulatory and acoustic. How? Let's consider these important points. Number 1, we can produce sounds which are heard in the same way, although they are produced differently. which means the auditory properties of speech sounds are independent somewhat, and they need to be studied on their own. I can just say, if you observe me to produce the sound, I can say zzz, I can say zzz. You will hear them as z, although I have used my jaws and the teeth in different positions. Almost any sound can be produced by varying the articulatory structure of sounds, which means, again, to repeat, that auditory aspects of speech need to be studied on their own. They are not entirely dependent on articulatory and acoustic features. Secondly, although the signal is filled with all kinds of information, but the listener is able to extract linguistic sounds from them. So there is something about the auditory aspects of speech sounds that it seems that the auditory system is disposed to consider. And what exactly are those dispositions are something that we need to look into. Unfortunately, we do not have advanced instruments to study the auditory aspects of speech, but pending the invention of such instruments, we continue to investigate the important aspects of auditory phonetics. Notice that speakers can easily distinguish the idiosyncratic differences, and they can extract the important linguistic features. So a speaker can say a, the same speaker can produce, another speaker can produce a, and the listener hears it as the same. I can say get, I can say get, but the speakers of the community hear it as one and the same sound. And finally, although speech is non-discrete, and this is important, although speech is non-discrete, that is, we produce sounds in continuation, acoustically, there is no way in which you can distinguish each sound from the other, and yet the human ear can distinguish each sound from the other. So the human ear is able to impose a discrete structure on the indiscrete speech, and how it is done needs to be investigated. Obviously, the study of auditory phonetics is not insignificant. Now, it is important to note that the acoustic information is not enough to interpret the meaning of the speech signal. The listener has to interpret it according to the physiological and contextual input and phonological structure of the language. This is important to recognize. That is why in this course we introduce ourselves to both phonetics and phonology. How speech sounds convey meanings is something which is a complex phenomenon which involves all these aspects of phonetics as well as phonology. The terminology used in phonetics draws from the three branches: articulatory, auditory, and acoustic phonetics. Occasionally, however, we have redundancy. When we are talking about the same phenomenon, but the term is used sometimes from articulatory phonetics, sometimes from auditory phonetics, and sometimes from acoustic phonetics. For example, we use the term amplitude and fundamental frequency, which are acoustic terms. But we also use the term like loud or pitch. Now, pitch and loudness are auditory terms, and fundamental frequency and amplitude are acoustic terms. We should be very careful in using these terms and distinguishing their use. When we are discussing acoustic properties of speech sounds, then it is better to use acoustic terms, and not only better, but actually also necessary to use acoustic terms. This is especially so because these terms are well defined within the domain of their use. What we call loudness is a complex phenomenon. It is related to amplitude but is not directly dependent on amplitude. Amplitude and intensity both are involved in producing speech sounds that can be considered to be loud or not loud. So we have come to the end of module 2. We looked at the preliminary aspects of the three branches of phonetics, namely articulatory, acoustic, and auditory phonetics. As we said, we will focus on articulatory and acoustic phonetics. Auditory phonetics will have to be left at this stage. In the following modules, we first turn to articulatory phonetics and then to acoustic phonetics, and these will complete the discussion of phonetics in this course. We will then take up the phonology section of this course, where all the discussion on phonetics that we have had will be crucially useful, and thus both the components, phonetics and phonology, are interrelated and dependent on each other. Thank you.